Hey guys, it's me again. Thought I'd spring an unexpected video on you guys, and that's because I'm actually trying to change things up a bit with the channel, because I am trying to pay attention to what people are saying and how they watch the content and trying to make it as useful as I could possibly make it, and that's a learning curve. So what I'll try this time is I'll try to separately do the Project Solo update video for those of you who are doing it or are curious about what the actual project is doing, and I'll do those on Thursdays. And then on Friday, I will record the proper video for the podcast or for the episode for that week, and then release that on Saturdays. And I'm also working on getting some interviews in as well. So I'm kind of scaling things up to having 3 pieces of content a week from the original 1 video. So I hope you guys like this format more, and if not, I'll change it. So what I'd like to do in this specific set of updates is I'll kind of give you an overview of what the Project Solo journey has been like for me and what I've been experiencing with it and what conclusions I've come to, just from the perspective and from the idea of having this independent project that I've been working on. So for those of you who are not in tune with what Project Solo is, it's the concept that if you have something that is exclusively of your own, a project that you have to do yourself, at least for the first part of it has to be in secret, so that you can learn how to have time for yourself, and then learn how to work with yourself. And then the point of that is to learn how to live with yourself in a balanced fashion. So for the first week, that was the most probably exciting week of it because I kept it in complete secret, and that was just a lot of fun. It was interesting to watch my mind come up with ways to run it and predict how it's going to go. And obviously that failed because you can't predict how such things go. It was kind of this emergence of what I call the objective self, where I had to learn how to speak to myself in order to figure out what the project is and how to do it and how to explain it to everybody else and how to also make time for it with all the different other obligations that I've had. So that was the first week, and that was great. The second week was a little bit anxiety provoking for sure, because that's where I kind of really narrowed in and having to do that negotiation with my objective self and recognizing that as much as I wanted to say that, oh, okay, I'm going to do this project independently, the opinions of others and, obviously my family members and people who are close to me, and even just the draw off time for my other obligations are quite significant. And I really had to learn how to negotiate that within me, and it was not as fun of a week at all. The third week definitely was not easy. I think it was getting progressively harder. And the reason why it was getting progressively harder is because I realized that I really made myself exist in solitude just within the confines of that specific project. And that idea of having to be alone and to have to really look back on it and justify yourself to yourself over and over and over again so that you could continue to do what you're doing and also kind of defend your right to do so morally to everybody else was getting progressively harder. And my understanding of that came from my understanding of why that happened came from the notion that we all have a narrative that we need to build, and the idea of this narrative has to be consistent with what we're doing. So if we can't explain ourselves to ourselves, and we can't rely on other people to make us feel better about ourselves, as we do through various forms of relationships and validations and whatever else, and if we're left alone without any of those support structures, it completely clobbers you, right? Because what you do is you have to go back and you start thinking about all of the things that you may have done wrong or that ended you up in solitude, which your brain obviously tells you that, things you totally deserve for being a piece of shit. Whether or not you like it, I think most people have some form of that, worse or, better than others. But this idea of ending up in solitude and having that solitude impact me psychologically because I chose to do it myself led me to the concept of, hey, if you have a proper narrative where you can explain to yourself what you're doing and why it's a good thing, not necessarily even the right thing, but at least like a good enough thing to do, that was kind of my outcome from that week of Project Solo. So now the fourth week, which is this week, has been probably even increasingly harder, and this is kind of an interesting thing to observe because I started on such a high note. It was great. I thought this was going to be amazing. And then the next weeks were like lower and lower and lower and lower. And there was certainly a point where I was doing things out of obligation. I think you can really see it in my last video because I can't particularly say that it was a cheerful bundle of joy filming it. And, There were many reasons for that, and one of the reasons was because it was getting harder and harder to justify to myself, why the hell should I continue this if it's, other people don't get it. I already kind of delivered the idea, so for the people who do get it, they should, pick up on it and they can figure it out. So should I really designate that much of my time, and most importantly, go through the suffering of self-questioning and of having to take time away from my family and time away from my work and take time away from my relationship to continue doing something like this? And what that really underlined for me is the significance in which we find meaning through the validity of efforts and the return of efforts for other people. And I think that sounded kind of complicated, but what I meant by this is, if we see that the efforts that we are putting in are providing some form of result and response to other people, we will continue them. And if we get some validation in terms of positive feedback, in terms of love and appreciation for somebody close to you, says, oh my God, that's the best thing I've ever heard, and you should continue it for sure, it really pushes us to continue. But if we're void of that, which is actually the purpose of this project, it is to create this artificial state of discomfort and an artificial state of solitude, then we really have to dig deep within ourselves and question our ability to continue doing what we're doing and continuing doing your project in a state of increasing suffering. And the increasing suffering comes from the fact that, again, you're doing this alone. Like, do you think your brain's used to the fact that you're going to go in and you're going to get some form of validation, you're going to get a pat on the back, you're going to get a monetary output, or you're going to get 50,000 followers, but you're not getting that. And the more that it's not getting that, the more it's starting to freak out, because whatever classical standards it has in your head and whatever classical processes you've built, whatever you think you've seen other people do, and whatever structures you use to measure your own success, they're not working anymore. Like, each of those are now giving you warning signs of, hey, this isn't good. Like, you're not getting what you're supposed to be getting for this. You're doing something wrong. And if you can't recognize that you're doing something wrong, maybe it's you who are wrong. And like, fundamentally wrong as a human. And finding these areas of trouble, finding these pain points in your head, I think is actually extremely important. As my lesson from the 4th week of Project Solo is that I think we all have these pain points exist. That's the points from which a lot of self-doubt and a lot of dependent tendencies tend to come. And that's built there because there is a very valid mechanism that does exist for getting positive reinforcement for behaviors from other people that kind of helps us socialize and build relationships. But that's something that can and does misfire if applied to improving yourself, or doing something for yourself, or doing something that other people may not agree with. And the notion that you might be doing something right that other people just don't understand or don't care for, and you should continue doing it anyways, is not something that is obviously innately taught to most of us. So that was my kind of revelation for this specific week. I did learn a few interesting things about how my brain worked by observing that. And one of the things was that I absolutely am trying to avoid any type of pain, pain being psychological suffering or self-doubt or questioning or even discomfort with my own motivations, by having an urge to try to find some validation, right? And I actually have to make a conscious effort not to bring it up with my wife, not to bring it up with my friends in any way that's not productive. I actually do find a lot of comfort and a lot of pleasure in seeing comments come in and seeing people say, hey, this is something that helped me, or this is something that I liked, or this is something that I'm trying. And that's interesting. And I question about whether or not I should even disable comments so that people don't have the chance to do so, and if I even deserve that validation. And my conclusion was yes, right? Because if it's something that your brain can build on its own and it can benefit from it, that's exactly the lesson you want to teach it. That it can become self-sufficient and it can build its own sources of happiness without having to involve anybody else. And then the decision to involve somebody else then becomes an optional one, not a mandatory one, and then changes the dynamic of that relationship from being kind of dependent and hierarchical to being parallel and a partnership. So that was a big deal, and I think I'm well, I know that tomorrow's video is going to be around the subject of psychological pain, maybe physical pain, and finding some purpose within that. So I will talk much more about that. Now, another thing that I did kind of discover was that there was for sure a loss of motivation that comes with this increasing level of pain, and they seem to be directly in proportion. Like the more I'm freaking out, the less I want to do this. But not doing it does not remove the pain, which is very interesting because it already has created some form of pattern in your head that instills a pattern of implied failure. That if I was not to do a video this week, then I would always look back on myself and be like, well, I failed myself, or I did something wrong, and now it's imprinted, and then I had to go back and change my own mind, and that just creates a really, really, really bad pattern that you don't want to have. That's actually why when I started this particular project, I said I'm going to do it for the duration of 3 months, 12 episodes, and that's it, because now I can hold myself accountable to that, and if it doesn't work out, then I did not create a failure loop, and then I can at least get something out of it. So I guess that was kind of the second observation. The third observation really came to me when I started thinking about how I was doing my specific videos. And I'm going to try something different. I've kind of come to the recognition of the fact that there is a lot of experimentation that has to happen in learning how to work with your brain in isolation. And let me explain that a little bit more. So when I was coming up with the ideas for the first videos, for the next videos, I'd spend about 3-4 hours kind of writing them down and structuring them, trying to get my brain to think in states in which it has not thought before, because it's obviously not obvious or not innate to me to just be able to pick up and do a video and do a good job with it. So I try to do as good of a job by trying to put a structure around it. And that helped the first time, and the second time was pretty good, but I noticed that by the third time that I had to write things out, it started impeding my thinking, so that I couldn't be as natural or as fluent as I wanted to be. And what I think happened there is that if you allow your brain to work in solitude, and if you let it push through these instances of discomfort, it will start sorting out the different types of discomfort in your mind from ones that it can resolve from the ones that it can't resolve. And what I mean by that is you can't make yourself feel better for taking time for a project if your brain has not yet built the structures it needs to provide its validation, right? If I don't think that maybe that's something I should continue, I'm not going to convince myself I should until, well, something comes out of it. And I'm obviously going to push through that part. But if I can make it a little bit more pleasant in a different way, where I feel less self-conscious, then my brain is going to find that way because it's in a state of discomfort. And what I've actually come to the conclusion of is that I'm not going to write a lot of notes, or actually any notes, for a particular episode or particular conversation, and I'm going to try to get the pleasure out of the dynamic with which I try to deliver the content. And I think for those of you who are doing a project solo, you will see that you will actually start learning about how to make yourself enjoy something and make it suck a little bit less. And that, I think, is a key point of all of this. It's not about the project, it's not about the validation even, it's not about whether or not people like you more or less afterwards. It's learning how to work with your brain to accomplish things. And you can apply it throughout, and you can apply it later, and you can apply it to your work and your relationships and whatnot. So learning how to make yourself feel good about something that you're not sure about and learning how to enjoy it is a key takeaway of this. And one thing that I really did appreciate, by the way, guys, are the few people who have put up project solo videos, who have started doing things. I've seen, somebody who's doing writing, there are 2 people who are doing music, and it took a lot of courage for you guys to go in and put out your content. So it's Electra and Landon and Hannah, thank you very much. I do appreciate the fact that you decided to, take me up on these videos and jump in. And I do hope that you guys continue finding them useful. And for those of you who, would be into that, I'll maybe either watch them and see what people say or try doing it yourself. I see a lot of people are struggling with making such videos and doing projects like this. And I think what that does is that it further improves my point that these are behaviors that are beneficial, but are not innate to us, and that somebody who does struggle with motivation can benefit from going in and trying that. So I think that's about it for my Project Solo update. I'm going to work tomorrow on my next video, which is going to be about finding the purpose in the psychological pain that comes with making your own solitary state of being or solitary project or your own independence. And I hope that you guys like that. I'm also going to try to film an interview this week, and if it goes out, that's great. I'll post it next week, and I'll try to keep the content going up. All right, I will see you guys later, and thanks for watching.